Have you ever noticed how silence can speak louder than 1,000 words? How the moment you stop reaching out, the air between you becomes heavier, almost electric? What if I told you that the real power was never in the message you sent, but in the silence that followed when you didn't? Stay with me, because when you watch this till the end, you'll realize how stopping contact isn't about punishment, it's about awakening. It can save your peace, reclaim your worth, and change the entire rhythm of your life. 1. The power of absence. There is something deeply mysterious about what happens when you withdraw your presence. It's not just the act of silence, it's the quiet rebalancing of energy that begins the moment you step back. When you stop reaching out, you stop feeding a connection that may have grown dependent on your constant attention. And in that stillness, something begins to shift, not only in him, but within you. At first, absence feels unnatural. You may find yourself reaching for your phone, wondering if he notices, if he misses you, if he feels the emptiness you now feel. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that urge begins to fade, because you realize something profound. The more you withhold from seeking validation, the more you discover that you never truly needed it. Absence, in its purest form, becomes your teacher. It teaches you patience, it teaches you restraint. It teaches you that not every connection needs constant watering. Some need the rain of distance to see if their roots run deep. You begin to see that love built on neediness suffocates. But love built on presence, even in absence, endures. You see, when you were always there, always calling, always checking, always trying, you were unknowingly shielding him from his own reflection. He could not see what life felt like without your warmth, because you never allowed the cold to reach him. But now, as you step back, he begins to feel the draft. The silence around him turns into a mirror, reflecting the void you once filled. And here's the paradox. Your absence speaks louder than your words ever could. It says, I'm not here to chase what refuses to stay. It says, I value my peace more than your attention. It whispers truth in the language of stillness, a truth that cannot be denied. The beauty of absence is that it doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't dramatize. It simply is. It moves with quiet strength, like the moon pulling at the tide, unseen yet undeniable. You begin to understand that absence is not the opposite of love. It's part of it. Because in love, there must be space for reflection. There must be room for mystery. There must be silence between the notes, or the music becomes noise. So you stop contacting him not to punish, but to allow reality to unfold. If the bond is genuine, your absence will draw him closer to truth. If it was fragile, it will crumble without effort. Either way, you win, because you've chosen peace over pursuit. And in that choice, something changes. The tension that once held you captive begins to loosen. The waiting becomes less painful. The longing transforms into a kind of inner stillness. You realize that absence doesn't only reveal what others feel for you. It reveals what you truly feel for yourself. It's the moment when silence stops being something you fear and becomes something you crave, because in the silence, you hear something you'd forgotten, the sound of your own soul breathing. 2. Silence rearranges the energy. Silence is not empty, it is full of energy, full of information, full of unseen transformation. The moment you stop reaching out, you create a shift so subtle, so invisible, yet so powerful that the entire dynamic of the relationship begins to reorganize itself. Every text, every call, every emotional reaction was a thread connecting you. When you go quiet, those threads begin to loosen, and suddenly the energy that once ran outward starts to spiral inward, back to you. It's as if life itself exhales and says, finally, you're returning home. At first, the silence may feel like loss. You may feel as though something precious has been broken. But what you don't see yet is that silence isn't breaking anything. It's rearranging it. It's removing what was forced and revealing what's real. In silence, the energy that was once chaotic begins to settle. You stop reacting to the waves of uncertainty and start listening to the still water beneath them. Your emotions, once scattered, begin to gather again around the center of your being. You begin to feel grounded, calm, aware, and on the other side of that silence, he begins to feel something too. Confusion, because the rhythm has changed. The song he was used to hearing no longer plays the same. The melody of your tension is missing. He feels the imbalance, though he might not admit it. And slowly, energy begins to reverse its flow. What once came effortlessly from you now demands effort from him. That is the law of energy. When one side stops giving, the other must adjust or fall away. You have become the still point in the turning world. And it is from that stillness that true power is born. You see, silence doesn't just shift external dynamics. It purifies internal ones. It cleanses your emotional field from overthinking, overgiving, and overexplaining. It takes all the energy that was scattered, trying to hold something together, and channels it back into your spirit. That's why silence is not passive. It's deeply active. It rebuilds what words often destroy: dignity, clarity, and divine balance. It's also in silence that you begin to see what the noise had hidden. You start to notice patterns you ignored. You recognize how often you reached out to avoid discomfort, not because connection was necessary, but because stillness felt too quiet, too revealing. Now you sit in that quiet. You feel every echo of your emotions. You breathe through the longing, through the confusion, until they stop controlling you. And when they no longer control you, the silence becomes peace. You realize that you were never losing control by being quiet. You were reclaiming it. Because silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's the soul's way of saying, let life speak now. So while the world sees nothing happening, the energy is rearranging. And slowly, beautifully, what is not meant for you drifts away, while what is meant begins to find its way home, effortlessly. 3. You become the mystery. Again, there was a time when you were a mystery, when he couldn't quite figure you out. He was drawn to your energy, to your confidence, to the subtle way your silence made him want to know more. But somewhere along the way, in your eagerness to connect, you unfolded yourself too quickly. You revealed your every thought, every emotion, every availability. And just like that, the mystery faded. When you stop contacting him, that veil begins to return, not as a game, not as manipulation, but as a natural restoration of balance. The mystery returns not because you are hiding, but because you are healing. You are no longer offering pieces of yourself to be understood. You are gathering them to be whole again. And as that happens, something fascinating occurs. Your energy changes. Where you once felt desperate, you now feel deliberate. Where you once chased, you now attract. Your silence becomes magnetic. Because you are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are embodying it. Mystery is not about being unreachable. It's about being unshakable. It's the quiet confidence of knowing that you are enough, whether someone notices or not. It's the grace of being fully present in your own essence, without needing to be constantly seen. He begins to notice this shift. He can feel it before he can name it. He wonders why you're not reaching out, why your energy feels different, why his usual comfort has turned into curiosity. And that curiosity begins to pull him, not because you demanded attention, but because you withdrew it. You've become the mirror of his own uncertainty. Your silence makes him see what he once ignored. He starts to wonder, what is she thinking now? Has she moved on? Did she stop caring? And with every unanswered question, your value rises, not because you've changed who you are, but because you've remembered it. You see, the essence of mystery is presence without pressure. It's being fully alive within yourself, while allowing others the freedom to discover you at their own pace, or not at all. And once you touch that state, you realize that mystery is not something you perform. It's something you become. It's the way your energy speaks without words. It's the way your calm unsettles chaos. It's the way your silence makes people listen harder. When you stop contacting him, you stop feeding predictability. You remind him and yourself that you are not an open book to be skimmed, but a sacred story to be read slowly, with reverence. And as you rise in that quiet mystery, you begin to understand something timeless. It was never the constant communication that made you unforgettable. It was your depth. It was your soul. It was the way your silence carried, meaning that words never could. And that is when everything shifts. He begins to chase understanding. You begin to rest in truth. And what was once pursuit turns into presence. A sacred dance of energy, of awareness, of soul, rediscovered through silence. 4. Reflection begins. When you stop contacting him, you are not only removing noise from the space between you, you are clearing the fog from your own mind. For the first time, reflection begins. And not the kind of reflection that comes from overthinking, replaying memories, or trying to predict outcomes, but the kind that comes from deep stillness. When you finally allow yourself to see, silence opens a door inside you that words could never unlock. You begin to see not only who he was in the relationship, but who you became. Did you lose yourself trying to keep him? Did you bend so much that your spirit forgot its shape? These are not easy questions, but they are sacred ones, the kind that only arise when the noise fades. In the quiet, memories begin to drift back, but they feel different now. Moments that once made you ache now begin to teach. You start to realize that love is not meant to exhaust you, it's meant to expand you. You begin to notice how often you mistook effort for connection, or attention for affection, and suddenly, what once felt like rejection starts to look like redirection. Reflection reveals something deeper. The parts of you that were waiting to be seen not by him, but by you. Because silence, when honored, becomes a mirror. It shows you what you gave freely and what you gave away carelessly. It reveals the boundaries you never spoke, the needs you never voiced, the love you offered without reciprocity. And as painful as those realizations may be, they also bring freedom. When you start seeing yourself clearly, you stop settling for half-seen love. You stop waiting for someone else to validate your worth, because reflection shows you it was never gone. It was only misplaced in the noise of wanting to be chosen. In this reflective space, you also begin to feel compassion, not only for him, but for yourself. You forgive the version of you who didn't know better, who gave too much, who stayed too long. You hold her with gentleness. You realize she was never foolish, only hopeful. And that hope, though it hurt you, was proof of your capacity to love deeply. That is not weakness, that is divine strength. Reflection teaches you something vital. You cannot control how someone values you, but you can control how you value yourself. You cannot make someone see your worth, but you can refuse to forget it. And the moment that truth sinks in, you stop searching for closure in another person, because you find it in yourself. That is the quiet miracle of reflection. It doesn't erase the pain, it transforms it into wisdom. And from that wisdom, a new kind of strength is born. Not the strength that hardens, but the one that softens with understanding. 5. The shift from chaser to chooser as reflection deepens. A subtle but powerful shift begins inside you. The moment you stop contacting him, you stop being the one who pursues and start becoming the one who decides. You move from the energy of chasing to the energy of choosing. At first, this transition feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. You've spent so long measuring your worth by how he responded, how often he reached out, how much effort he gave. But when silence stretches, you start realizing that your peace cannot depend on someone else's participation. You begin to feel the power of your own agency again. The quiet authority that comes when you no longer need to convince anyone to stay. This is not arrogance. It's awakening. Because to choose means to reclaim. It means remembering that your heart, your time, your energy are sacred currencies, and you alone decide where they flow. When you were chasing, your world revolved around his responses. The waiting, the hoping, the disappointment, the occasional validation that kept the cycle alive. But now, without contact, you begin to experience the stillness of sovereignty. You no longer wake up checking your phone or interpreting every silence as rejection. You begin to move differently, speak differently, think differently. You realize you were never powerless. You had simply forgotten that your attention was power. And when you withdraw that attention, the balance begins to shift, because the one who chases is always reacting, but the one who chooses is always creating. You stop asking, why doesn't he reach out? And begin to ask, why was I waiting for someone who doesn't? You stop needing closure from his words, because your silence has already written its own ending, one-lined with self-respect. The moment you become the chooser, you stop settling for being an option. You start aligning with relationships that reflect your value rather than question it. You realize that love should flow, not force. And you understand that what is meant for you will never require you to beg, prove, or shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. And that realization, that turning point, doesn't make you colder, it makes you clearer. It doesn't harden your heart, it strengthens your boundaries. Because choosing yourself is not an act of selfishness, it's the beginning of spiritual balance. There's a deep calm that comes when you stop chasing. You no longer need to predict outcomes. You no longer measure your worth through his silence. You begin to walk with peace in your chest, that quiet, steady rhythm of knowing you are enough. You've stopped running after what doesn't align, and in doing so, you've created space for what truly does. And that space, that sacred emptiness, is not loneliness, it's preparation. Because when you stop chasing, you make room for what is ready to meet you halfway. 6. The ego feels the absence. First, there's a fascinating thing about silence. Before the heart misses, the ego reacts. When you stop contacting him, the first thing he feels is not love. It's confusion, not longing, but loss of control. Because attention to the ego is oxygen. It sustains its illusion of importance. And when you stop supplying that oxygen, the ego begins to gasp. At first he might appear indifferent, even dismissive, but behind that facade something begins to stir. The routine he was accustomed to, your messages, your energy, your warmth, suddenly disappears, and the mind, conditioned to expect what was always there, begins to question, where did she go? Why did the energy change? The ego doesn't miss you, it misses what you provided. The validation, the reassurance, the soft landing place. But in that discomfort, something powerful begins to unfold. The silence you created begins to confront him with truth. Not through confrontation, but through absence. He starts to feel a subtle unease, a hollow echo in moments where your presence used to fill the room. That emptiness becomes the first whisper of realization. The ego doesn't understand it yet, but the soul does. The heart begins to remember what it once took for granted. And as that happens, your silence begins to transform from absence into presence. It becomes something he can't escape. It lingers in his thoughts, his routines, his quiet moments. He starts to replay conversations, reimagine scenarios, wonder if you're thinking of him, if you've moved on, if someone else now holds your attention. That is how the ego slowly gives way to the heart, because the absence that once bruised his pride begins to awaken something deeper, empathy, reflection, maybe even regret. But you, on the other side of this silence, are no longer waiting for those realizations, because while his ego was gasping, you were healing. While he was adjusting to the void, you were learning to fill your own. You were rediscovering joy in solitude, strength in stillness, and peace in being unseen. And that's the paradox of detachment. When you stop feeding someone else's ego, you begin to nourish your own spirit. You stop participating in the illusion that attention equals love. You stop seeking validation in the eyes of someone who doesn't see you clearly. You begin to realize that your silence was never about him. It was about you. reclaiming the rhythm of your energy, breaking the cycle of emotional dependency, stepping into the fullness of your own presence. The ego in him will wrestle. It may resist, it may deny, it may even reach out, not always out of love, but out of the need to reassert control. But you will see it now for what it is. Because once you've tasted peace, chaos can no longer seduce you. You no longer respond to tests, you observe them. You no longer argue for understanding, you embody it. You no longer chase clarity, you are clarity. And that's when everything transforms. Not because he changed, but because you did. The same silence that unsettled his ego has freed your soul. The same absence that confused him has grounded you. You've learned that silence doesn't just teach others how to treat you, it teaches you how to treat yourself. And when you master that lesson, you realize absence is not the end of connection, it's the beginning of truth. 7. The heart follows the mind. There comes a time in every silence where the heart begins to listen to what the mind already knows. At first, your heart resists. It clings to what was, to what it remembers, to what it hopes might return. It aches for the comfort of what felt familiar, even if that comfort came with pain. But as the days stretch and the silence deepens, something starts to shift inside you. The noise fades, and the truth, quiet, patient, and long ignored, starts to rise to the surface. You begin to see that the silence between you isn't a void. It's a teacher. It's showing you that your worth doesn't dissolve when you're unseen, and your beauty doesn't fade when you're unacknowledged. The heart, in its innocence, wanted connection, but the mind, in its quiet wisdom, knew that not every connection is sacred. So when you stopped contacting him, you unknowingly gave the mind permission to lead the way, to protect the heart until it was strong enough to walk again. At first, your emotions will resist this shift. They would pull at you like waves trying to draw you back to the shore you just left. But the longer you stay still, the more you realize that this ocean of stillness is not empty, it's healing. You start to feel a strange calm, not because everything makes sense, but because you've stopped trying to make sense of everything. That's when the heart starts to follow. Slowly, hesitantly, it begins to catch up to the truth the mind has already accepted. That chasing someone who cannot meet you is a form of self-abandonment. You realize that love that costs you your peace is too expensive to keep paying for. And so, you surrender not to the loss, but to the lesson. This surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom wrapped in tenderness. It's the moment you stop trying to resurrect what was never meant to last. It's the breath that says, I release you, not because I don't care, but because I finally care enough about myself. And when that understanding sinks in, your silence becomes something else. It becomes your strength. The heart, once desperate for reassurance, now begins to soften in a new way. It beats not out of longing, but out of clarity. It starts to trust that if something is meant for you, it will recognize your silence not as rejection, but as sacred space. And in that space, love either grows or disappears. But either way, you win peace. The mind's clarity and the heart's softness finally meet, and that union becomes your liberation. You are no longer torn between logic and emotion. You are aligned, whole, steady, awake. The silence that once scared you now comforts you. Because in it, you've discovered something precious. Your own rhythm, your own voice, your own worth that no one else can define. 8. You reclaim your inner space. There is a sacred moment after the storm, when the clouds begin to part and the light filters gently through. That moment is what happens when you reclaim your inner space. When you are constantly reaching out, your energy was scattered, pieces of your soul drifting towards someone who was never meant to hold them all. Every message, every thought, every worry became a small leak in the container of your spirit. And so you felt drained, not just emotionally, but energetically. You were giving parts of yourself to someone who could not pour back into you. But when you stop contacting him, when you truly stop, something incredible begins to happen. All that scattered energy begins to return home. Like a tide reclaiming the shore, your spirit begins to gather itself again. You start feeling yourself, your laughter, your peace, your curiosity, all returning, reclaiming your inner space. Doesn't happen in an instant. It's a gentle unfolding. At first, you might feel the discomfort of the emptiness you once filled with distraction. But soon, that emptiness becomes a garden. You start to plant new thoughts, new habits, new dreams in the soil of your silence. You wake up one morning and realize you didn't think of him. First thing, you notice you're breathing a little deeper, walking a little slower, smiling for no reason at all. That's your energy, once again belonging to you. Reclaiming your inner space means you no longer allow external validation to determine your internal peace. It means you can sit with your own company and feel full. You begin to protect your mental and emotional environment the same way you'd protect a sacred temple. You start saying no to things that disturb your peace, not out of pride, but out of reverence for your well-being. And the more you nurture this sacred space within, the more beautiful your outer world becomes. People begin to sense your energy, steady, grounded, radiant. They can feel the difference, even if they can't name it. Because when you reclaim your energy, you reclaim your presence, and presence is magnetic. You realize you were never meant to be consumed by another person's uncertainty. You are meant to stand rooted in your own clarity. And when you live from that place, relationships stop being survival mechanisms and become sacred exchanges. You no longer reach out from emptiness, you extend from wholeness. Reclaiming your inner space is not about closing yourself off. It's about expanding your boundaries so that only peace fits within them. You learn that solitude is not punishment, it's preparation. It's where you gather your strength, your identity, your truth. And from that strength, you begin to rebuild, not for anyone else, but for yourself. That's when silence becomes serenity. You no longer fear losing connection because you have built a connection with yourself that cannot be lost. And once you find that, you'll never again accept a love that demands you to shrink in order to be seen. 9. Time tests intention. Time is the great revealer. It has a way of peeling back illusion and showing what truly lives beneath the surface. When you stop contacting him, time becomes your quiet ally. It begins to test what words could never prove. Intention. In the first few days, his ego might whisper that your silence is temporary. He might assume that you'll eventually break it, that you'll return as you always have. But then, time stretches and silence holds. And that's when truth begins to reveal itself. Time has a rhythm that exposes everything that is false and refines everything that is real. When you step back, you give both yourself and him the chance to reveal who you truly are without performance. Because absence has a way of revealing character. Some will fill the space with noise, reaching out only to test their control. Others will use it as a mirror, to reflect, to grow, to realize what they almost lost. Time will show you which one he is. But more importantly, it will show you who you are becoming. Because while you wait, not for him, but for peace, time is shaping you quietly. It's teaching you patience without attachment. It's teaching you to value consistency over chemistry. It's teaching you that love that is meant to stay will never need to be chased to remain. Time tests not only his intention, but yours too. It asks you, what do you truly want? Do you want comfort or do you want connection? Do you want attention or alignment? Do you want temporary reassurance or eternal peace? And as the days pass, you begin to see your own answers reflected in your peace. The less you crave contact, the more you realize that what you truly longed for wasn't him. It was balance, safety, reciprocity. It was being seen without having to shout, being loved without having to beg. And that understanding changes you. You stop viewing silence as a waiting room and start seeing it as a sanctuary. Because time is not something to be endured. It's something to be used wisely. You use it now to rebuild, to refocus, to realign. You use it to strengthen your boundaries, deepen your spiritual awareness, and nurture the woman or man you are becoming. And while time is revealing his truth, it's also protecting your path. Because if he is not meant to return, then your silence will be the distance that saves you. But if he is meant to return, he will come not as the same man who left, but as one who has seen what life feels like without your presence, and who values that presence deeply now. Either way, time will bring you clarity, because time, when combined with silence, doesn't just expose truth, it refines it. It filters out the impulsive, the performative, and leaves only what is sincere. And when that truth finally arrives, you'll no longer feel torn between heart and logic, between longing and letting go. You'll simply feel aligned with yourself, with peace, with the rhythm of life that always rewards patience and authenticity. Time tests intention not to punish, but to prepare. It ensures that when love comes back into your life, whether it's his or someone new, you'll meet it as someone whole, not as someone waiting to be completed. And that is the quiet miracle of stepping back. You didn't lose by being silent. You gained the one thing that time always honors, truth. And that truth, once revealed, will never abandon you again. 10. The soul stops negotiating. There comes a turning point, so subtle you might miss it at first. The moment the soul decides to stop negotiating for its worth. For a long time, you might have bargained with yourself. You told your heart that if you just loved a little harder, waited a little longer, gave a little more, maybe they would finally see your value. You kept showing up in spaces that starved you, convincing yourself that crumbs were enough, that silence was just reflection, that distance meant confusion, not disinterest. But there comes a sacred moment when your soul simply exhales, says, no more, not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but out of truth. The kind of truth that doesn't scream, it just stands, firm, unmoved, whole. You begin to realize that love cannot be sustained on the energy of hope alone. Hope without action becomes exhaustion, and you've grown too wise to keep confusing longing with alignment. So your soul begins to rise, quietly but powerfully, choosing peace over persuasion, self-respect over repetition, and growth over guilt. When the soul stops negotiating, your boundaries stop feeling like walls. They become doors that only truth can open. You no longer bend yourself backward to fit into someone's limited vision of love. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable with your presence. You stop explaining why you deserve basic consideration, because your energy now speaks for you. It's a divine shift. The moment you no longer need to convince someone of your worth, you return to the source of it. And that return feels like liberation. It's not loud, it's not performative. It's peaceful. You begin to feel lighter, freer, as if you finally unclenched your soul from a grip it was never meant to hold. And in that stillness, something beautiful happens. You realize how much energy was being drained by the constant effort to be understood. When that effort stops, your inner world starts to bloom again. You rediscover your voice, your laughter, your intuition. You start remembering what your life felt like before you made someone else. The center of your emotional gravity. This is not rejection, this is redirection. You're not walking away from love, you're walking toward truth. And as the soul rests in this truth, it finds a new rhythm. A rhythm that doesn't depend on validation, but vibrates with integrity. You realize that peace is not something you must beg for. It's something you create by refusing to live in environments where your light must dim to survive. And once your soul learns that, it never unlearns it again. 11. When stillness becomes revelation. After the soul stops negotiating, a new kind of silence begins to emerge. Not the silence of distance, but the silence of revelation. This stillness is different. It's not about waiting for a response from someone else. It's about receiving a message from within. When you stop chasing, you start hearing. And what you begin to hear is the sound of your own wisdom, echoing through the chambers of your being. It's the soft whisper that was always there, but drowned beneath the noise of need. Now, in stillness, it finally speaks. Stillness reveals everything that chaos once concealed. You begin to notice the subtle truths you used to overlook. The way your body tenses around certain people, the way your spirit brightens around others. You begin to see patterns, cycles you kept calling love but were really lessons in disguise. And you start understanding that silence isn't empty. It's full of answers, waiting for the noise to fade so they can surface. You sit in that quiet and realize you were never alone. You were simply never still enough to feel the presence of your own spirit. That spirit, the divine compass within you, has been waiting patiently for your return. And now that you are home within yourself, revelation begins. Stillness becomes a mirror. It reflects not only who you are, but who you're becoming. You see both the fragility and the strength of your journey. You see how your heartbreak carved the space for wisdom. You see how rejection redirected you toward alignment. And you see how every pause, every silence, every unanswered message was never about abandonment. It was about redirection. In stillness, you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That shift changes everything. Because life is not punishing you, it is preparing you. Every unanswered call was a sacred delay, giving you time to grow into the version of yourself that can handle the love you truly deserve. And so, you stop rushing, you stop forcing outcomes, you begin to trust timing. Because you finally understand that divine timing isn't about delay, it's about alignment. The universe never withholds what is yours. It only withholds what isn't ready. And in that realization, stillness becomes gratitude. You no longer resist the waiting seasons, because you see that they're not barren. They're building something within you. Stillness turns into a sanctuary where you meet yourself over and over again, each time a little more healed, a little more honest, a little more whole. 12. The awakening of divine alignment. When you have walked through silence, survived the emptiness, and made peace with stillness, something begins to awaken inside you. A divine alignment that feels like remembering who you've always been. You no longer chase, you attract, you no longer beg, you embody, you no longer fear losing anyone, because you have found the one connection that can never be taken from you, your connection to the divine within. Alignment feels like calm. It feels like no longer needing to prove, perform, or pursue. It feels like breathing deeply without worry that love will vanish if you stop reaching for it. It feels like knowing that everything meant for you will find you when you are in harmony with yourself. This alignment is not perfection, it's presence. It's the understanding that your worth is not conditional, that your value does not fluctuate based on who stays or who leaves. It's realizing that peace is your birthright and joy is your natural state. Once you stop clinging to things not meant to last, you begin to see life differently now. You no longer view endings as failures, but as sacred closures that make room for new beginnings. You no longer see distance as rejection, but as divine redirection. And you no longer see your silence as loneliness, but as communion with your higher self. In divine alignment, love returns, but it looks different now. It's not desperate or fragile. It's steady, reciprocal, rooted in peace, not passion alone. Because you have learned the language of energy, you've learned that true love feels like rest, not resistance. And from this space, you begin to magnetize everything that matches your healed frequency. Opportunities flow effortlessly. People who once drained you lose their grip. You move through life not by effort, but by alignment. You realize that what you attract now is not a coincidence. It's a reflection of who you've become. The awakening of divine alignment is the merging of your humanity and your divinity. You no longer compartmentalize your spirit from your daily life. You speak with compassion, walk with awareness, love without attachment, and let go without fear. It's as if the entire universe exhales through you, softly reminding you that you were never lost, only learning to find your way home. Home, not as a place, but as a state of being, a state where peace is your foundation, faith is your guide, and love is your natural expression. And in that awakening, you understand the full circle of your journey. Silence taught you strength. Stillness taught you wisdom. Time taught you truth. And now, alignment teaches you grace. You realize that you didn't lose anyone. You found yourself, you didn't fall apart, you unfolded, you didn't end, you evolved. The heart that once broke is now the vessel through which light shines. The mind that once doubted is now the guardian of clarity. And the soul that once negotiated has now returned to its throne. Unmoved, unshaken, untouchable. This is divine alignment, where everything that left you led you closer to everything that was meant for you. And all that remains now is gratitude for the silence, the stillness, and the awakening that turned your pain into power and your loss into liberation. 13. The universe rewards release. There is a sacred rhythm to life, an unseen current that carries everything toward its rightful place. When you stop forcing, when you finally unclench your grip, the current begins to move again. That's the mystery of release. It's not an act of giving up, it's an act of trust. Most people mistake holding on for strength, but there is a deeper strength in letting go, because letting go requires faith. It requires you to believe that what is truly yours cannot be lost, and what is not meant for you cannot be kept. No matter how tightly you hold, when you stop contacting someone who no longer meets you halfway, you are not punishing them. You are aligning with the natural law of energy. You are saying to the universe, I trust you enough to stop controlling what's not mine to fix. And in that moment, something shifts. You move from resistance to resonance, from force to flow. Release is not emptiness, it's spaciousness. It is the space where blessings can finally breathe. Think of it this way. If your hands are always full of what drains you, how will you ever receive what fulfills you? The universe cannot pour into hands that refuse to let go. Every ending carries the seed of a beginning. But that seed cannot grow in the soil of attachment. When you release what no longer serves your growth, you make room for divine timing to unfold. This is why miracles often appear after surrender, not because you earned them through pain, but because you finally stopped blocking them with resistance. Sometimes the blessings were waiting all along, but you were too entangled in old energies to see them. Release clears your vision. It restores your sensitivity to truth. You begin to notice the peace that was always present beneath the noise of longing. You begin to feel guided, not because you know what comes next, but because you no longer need to. That's the paradox of release. The more you trust, the more aligned things become. The more you stop chasing, the faster what's meant for you finds you. It's as if the moment you stop trying to control, the universe rushes in to meet you halfway. Because now your energy is open, receptive, magnetic, whole. Release is an act of self-respect. It's saying, I refuse to carry what was never meant to stay. It's choosing peace over proof, freedom over fear. And it's knowing that every door that closes is not rejection, it's redirection. When you release, you are not losing, you are being repositioned. You are being moved from what is draining you to what is destined for you. And though the in-between may feel uncertain, it is sacred ground, because uncertainty is where faith grows its roots. Release is how the universe teaches you trust. It's how you learn that nothing meant for you will ever require you to abandon yourself to keep it. It's how you learn that endings aren't punishment, they are protection. So when you stop contacting him, when you stop chasing what refuses to meet you, remember, you are not retreating, you are returning to balance, returning to truth, returning to yourself. And that return is what opens every new beginning. Because when you stop holding on to what hurts, your hands are finally free to hold what heals. 14. Emotional sovereignty returns. Once you release what was never yours to carry, something sacred begins to return, your emotional sovereignty. It's the quiet power of realizing that your peace is no longer up for negotiation. You stop handing the remote control of your emotions to someone who doesn't even know how to hold it. For so long, your happiness may have depended on how quickly they replied, how often they called, how gently they spoke. You measured your worth through moments of attention that came and went like weather. But when you detach, when you reclaim your energy, you remember, my joy is not a reaction, it's a decision. Emotional sovereignty means standing in your own energy without being swayed by another's storms. It means you can feel deeply but not drown. It means you can care without clinging, love without losing yourself, give without depleting. When you reclaim your emotional independence, you stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You understand that love that constantly hurts is not passion, it's imbalance. True connection doesn't drain you, it nourishes you. And the more you honor your peace, the clearer this truth becomes. Emotional sovereignty doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It doesn't make you distant, it makes you discerning. You no longer chase chemistry that comes with chaos. You crave consistency, you value calm, you begin to crave the kind of energy that matches your maturity, and that is where you begin to feel powerful again. Not the kind of power that dominates others, but the kind that governs the self. You realize that strength isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about directing it. You can love someone and still choose silence. You can care and still walk away. You can feel pain and still hold your head high, knowing your peace is not up for ransom. This sovereignty transforms the way you move through life. You stop being reactive. You start being responsive. You stop waiting for closure. You become closure. You stop explaining your worth. You embody it. There's a quiet beauty in that level of wholeness. It's the beauty of knowing that your emotional landscape is your sacred ground, and not everyone deserves to walk through it. You become intentional with your energy. You protect your peace as if it were your last breath, because, in truth, peace is breath. When emotional sovereignty returns, you stop performing for love and start embodying it. You realize that the most magnetic energy in the world is the one that doesn't chase, the one that stands, the one that radiates without reaching. And in that stillness, life starts to respond differently to you. People treat you differently. Opportunities align differently. Because you are no longer begging from a place of emptiness. You are creating from fullness. And that fullness, this return to your center, is what makes you unshakable. You become the calm in every storm, the clarity in every confusion. You realize that no matter who leaves, you remain, and what remains in you is enough. 15. He begins to feel the mirror effect now. As you stand in your peace, detached but radiant, something begins to shift. Not just within you, but around you. The energy you once poured outward begins to reflect back, and he starts to feel it. Energy never disappears, it transforms. The warmth you once offered freely, the attention that once filled his emptiness, all of it echoes now in your absence. He begins to feel the quiet that you once filled with care. He begins to notice the void where your presence once lived. At first, he might not recognize what he's feeling. He might scroll through messages that no longer come, glance at his phone expecting a name that no longer appears. But what he's really feeling is the mirror effect. The energy he gave you, or withheld from you, returns to him now. The indifference he once offered becomes his own emptiness. The silence he once used as control now becomes his teacher. And as he sits in that reflection, he begins to see himself through your absence. This is not revenge, it's revelation. Your silence holds up a mirror to his behavior. It reflects what words could never explain. Because silence is the most honest response to what no longer deserves explanation. He begins to realize that you are not asking for too much, you are offering too much to someone giving too little. He begins to remember the small moments he dismissed, the way your voice carried warmth, the way your energy grounded his chaos. Now that warmth is gone, and in its place is a quiet that forces reflection. You see, people don't change when you argue with them. They change when they lose access to the version of you that tolerated less than you deserved. And that's what your silence does. It removes their comfort. It dismantles the illusion that they could always return to your energy without effort. The mirror effect is not about making them feel your pain. It's about allowing them to see their own. And in doing so, you restore balance. Because true healing cannot occur while one person overgives and the other overtakes. Your absence now becomes medicine. It detoxifies the dynamic that was once built on imbalance. It reveals truth where denial once lived, and whether he chooses to evolve or remain the same, your lesson is complete. You have chosen yourself. And in that choice, you embody a quiet truth. That silence does not only heal, it also teaches through contrast, through distance, through reflection. It reveals the spiritual law that energy always seeks equilibrium. When he feels the mirror effect, he's not just missing you, he's meeting himself. And that is the most powerful thing your silence can ever give him. A chance to grow. But whether he learns or not is not your concern anymore. You have already transcended the lesson. You've turned pain into purpose, heartbreak into harmony, attachment into awareness. And that is how the story transforms. Not because he came back, but because you did, because you chose to come home to yourself. And in doing so, you became the reflection of every truth he was too afraid to face. So when you stop contacting him, understand, this is not an ending. It is the universe balancing energy, returning you to your rightful place. And as the mirror clears, so does your path forward, radiant, peaceful, and deeply, divinely free. 16. You realize what love really is. There comes a quiet hour in every heart, a moment when the noise fades and something ancient whispers within you. This is what love was meant to be. It's not a sudden revelation. It's not a blinding light. It's a slow unfolding, like dawn spilling gently over the edges of a sleeping world. You realize that love was never meant to be a constant performance of presence, not an endless stream of messages, nor a rhythm of reassurance demanded out of fear. Love, in its truest form, breathes even in silence. It knows how to exist in stillness without losing its pulse. There was a time you equated closeness with contact, where words felt like proof and attention felt like air. You thought that if someone loved you, they'd always reach out, always say the right thing, always stay visible. But maturity teaches a softer truth. The ones who truly hold you in their heart don't need to remind you every day that they do. Their love moves like a current beneath the surface, unseen but powerful enough to guide the tide. You begin to see how real connection doesn't fade when words do. In fact, it deepens in the quiet, where the essence of what was shared continues to live. That's when you understand that presence is not always physical, and remembrance does not require effort. Some souls are simply etched into your being, like rivers carved into stone. Whether near or far, they remain. This realization doesn't make love colder. It makes it purer, because you no longer cling out of fear of losing. You no longer chase out of desperation to prove your worth. Instead, you start to trust. Trust that if something is true, it will remain. Trust that love does not demand. It allows, it does not cage. It frees. It does not beg. It blesses. And through that quiet understanding, you find your heart changing shape. What once needed validation now seeks peace. What once feared distance now honors space. Because you see that love without freedom is possession. And possession without understanding is fear wearing a disguise. The real love you seek, the kind that heals rather than drains, exists only where there is space for two souls to breathe. When that revelation dawns, even your memories transform. You stop replaying the moments they didn't text, didn't call, didn't show up the way you hoped. Instead, you remember the sincerity in their laughter, the truth in their eyes, the small gestures that spoke louder than any grand declaration. You start to see that maybe love was never lost. Maybe it just changed form. Maybe it was meant to teach you what remaining truly means. And so, love ceases to be a contract between two people trying to fill each other's voids. It becomes a meeting between two beings who have learned to hold their own wholeness, yet still choose to share it. That is the essence of sacred love. Connection that lives even in stillness, that breathes without demand and exists without fear. In that stillness, you come to see that real love never diminishes in silence. It reveals itself there. The one who truly loves you may not always reach for you, but their energy, their intention, their quiet care, it lingers. It remains like warmth in the room long after the flame has gone out. And when you finally understand this, you no longer ache for attention. You rest in connection. You no longer seek reassurance. You dwell in trust. That realization changes everything, because you stop trying to control love and start learning how to receive it. You stop measuring it by effort and begin feeling it through presence. And suddenly love is not something you chase. It's something you become. 17. The return, or the release there, comes a time when the silence becomes so deep that it starts to speak, not in words, but in revelations. You begin to see the truth, not through explanations, but through absence. What was once confusion becomes clarity, not because someone answered you, but because they didn't. It's strange, isn't it, how silence can become a teacher. It holds a mirror up to the soul, revealing what was real and what was merely comfortable. You start to see how energy speaks louder than promises ever could. The one who was meant to stay will feel the pull to return, transformed, awakened, ready, and the one who was never truly there will fade like an echo, leaving behind only the lesson they were meant to deliver. Both are blessings, because you no longer need to wonder. You no longer need to interpret mixed signals or read between the lines. Silence, by its nature, filters truth from illusion. It shows you who was rooted in love, and who was only passing through for the warmth of your light. And maybe for the first time, you stop chasing outcomes. You stop waiting for closure, because you realize closure was never in their return. It was in your release. The moment you stopped begging for peace and decided to be peace, you ended the cycle. You turned your waiting into wisdom. It's a sacred turning point. That moment when you understand that whether they come back or not, you've already won. Because you didn't lose yourself in the silence. You found yourself there. You found your stillness, your strength, your unshakable, knowing that peace is not something someone gives you. It's something you create when you finally stop fighting reality. If they return, truly return, you'll recognize it, not through words, but through presence, not through promises, but through consistency. They'll no longer speak from a place of guilt or nostalgia, but from alignment, and you'll see it, you'll feel it, that something has shifted. The connection, if reborn, will breathe honesty. It will no longer ask you to shrink for love, but to stand tall within it. But if they do not return, if they vanish like the last trace of sunlight, then that too is grace, because life removes what cannot remain. It prunes what no longer serves growth. And while that pruning hurts, it also frees. You begin to honor the endings, to bow to them, knowing they make space for beginnings you cannot yet see. And in that release, you feel your soul expanding. You start to understand that peace never requires you to beg. It never demands that you twist yourself into proof of your worth. Peace stands quietly in the corner, waiting for you to notice it, waiting for you to choose it over chaos. That's when you stop seeing silence as punishment and start seeing it as purification. It burns away what was false, leaving only what was ever real. And you, reborn in its quiet fire, begin to move differently. Lighter, calmer, freer, because now you know what returns will never need to be chased. What's real will always recognize your worth, and what leaves was never meant to stay. 18. The awakening stopping contact was never a strategy. It was never manipulation, no pride, no punishment. It was an awakening, a deep, soul-level decision to stop feeding what starved you, to stop giving where there was no reciprocity, to stop bleeding energy into places that could not hold your depth. It was not about making someone miss you, it was about remembering yourself. That decision, however painful, was a declaration. I deserve energy that flows both ways. And once your soul whispered that truth, you could no longer go back to the way things were, because awakening changes everything. It changes how you love, how you wait, how you let go. It teaches you that silence isn't empty, it's sacred. It's the sound of boundaries meeting self-respect. In that sacred silence, you begin to understand that withdrawal is not weakness, it is strength in its purest form. The strength to say, I love you, but I love my peace more. It's the strength to stop dancing for crumbs when you were made for the feast of mutual energy. It's the strength to stop proving your value to those who were too blind to see it. At first, that silence feels like death, the death of connection, of hope, of familiar rhythm. But in time, you realize it's not death at all. It's rebirth. Something within you begins to bloom. Where emptiness once was, you start to see how endings and beginnings are the same breath, exhaled and inhaled by the same soul. You realize that the pain you felt wasn't punishment, it was purification. It burned away the illusion that love could survive where respect could not. It stripped away the fantasy that attention equals affection. It left you raw but real, and in that rawness something divine began to take root. Self-worth that does not depend on response, and love that begins within. You start to see the beauty of stillness, the holiness of your own company. The nights that once ached with longing now hum with peace. The silence that once frightened you now feels like home, because you are no longer waiting for an echo. You've become the sound. And in that awakening, you see that loss was never loss. It was redirection. That endings were never punishments. They were sacred closures written for your evolution. That what you thought was breaking you was actually setting you free. You now move through the world differently. Not harder, but softer. Not guarded, but grounded. You love still, deeply, sincerely, but without losing yourself. You give without expectation, and when something ends, you no longer collapse. You bow, you thank it, and you let it go. Because now you understand that silence was never the absence of connection. It was the birthplace of truth. It was where your boundaries learned to breathe, where your soul learned to stand. It was where endings became beginnings, and loss transformed into liberation. You awaken not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to be, whole, grounded, free. When you stop contacting a man, you aren't pushing love away. You are inviting truth to step forward. You are reminding the universe, I choose peace over attention. And in that moment you become untouchably powerful. Stay with me. Because when you watch this till the end, you'll realize that stopping contact is not about losing someone. It's about finding yourself again. It can save your energy, your dignity, and perhaps your life.